Hello and welcome to a special show, India's G20 Presidency. India will host the 18th G20 Summit in New Delhi starting on September 9th and 10th. The theme of India's G20 Presidency is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. India is hosting over 200 meetings across 13 working groups, 11 engagement groups, 5 initiatives and 8 finance working tracks. So what should be the priority of this year's G20? One earth, one family, one future. What should be on the priority list? What could be the moot point in terms of discussion? And what kind of breakthroughs are expected? Well, let's take that conversation forward with a very special panel. It gives me great pleasure now to bring on board Dr. Sangita Reddy, Dr. Anish Shah, and Mr. Subhrakant Panda, President of FICCI. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for joining us. Well, the lady will always have the first say. And Ms. Reddy, in terms of the breakthrough, initiative, and the dialogues, what do you think needs to be prioritized, what will be prioritized, and where do you think there could be some breakthroughs?
So thank you, Nikunj. I think this is clearly an important moment in the history of India's development and the perception of the world about India. So I think that we found a way, I think the Prime Minister and India has found a way to take G20 from a primarily commercial, something which started as a finance minister's meeting, into something which became a comprehensive, what's good for the world kind of dialogue. And India set the stage for that with this the wonderful tagline of one earth, one family, one future. But also the conversation has gone beyond the business, but spoken about a new world order, has focused on equity, on sustainability, on mutual cooperation. And I think it really took the higher ground by speaking about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Because once you set that stage of peace and development and equitable growth and sustainability, then many of the points that you want to talk about happen in a more holistic manner and with the manner of let's move together for the world's good. And so I think one of the first and most important things that India has done is really elevated the stage of G20.
Mr. Shah, if I can throw the same question to you as well, sir, in terms of dialogue, in terms of breakthroughs, what do you expect? Because there's always a difference in dialogue, negotiation, and breakthroughs.
So, Nikunj, first, it's great to see India taking leadership on the world stage. We've seen a quantum change in the way how India has been perceived. And a lot of credit for that does go to our Prime Minister and our government in terms of taking India to the world stage and becoming a world leader now. As Sangita said, the areas of focus are very important in the world today in the background of the complexities that we see. And while different folks may have different views and perspectives, the theme that has been selected is really the apt one because it is about one earth. And it is about what we need to do for climate change. It is about one family and ensuring that as a family, there are fewer differences. We are seeing a very fragmented world today. And it is about one future, a future where we are interconnected, not silos in themselves. And therefore, as we think about the negotiations and your specific question, there has to be a greater focus on folks coming together because our objectives are the same. Where we see potential breakdowns is where politics comes into the face of the economic and the overall agenda that's good for the people. We do see possibility of moving forward well on the climate front. India's leadership in that will be very effective in making that happen. Most other countries are very positively inclined to that. And I think as India takes the leadership on that, it should hopefully result in a good set of answers. On the second one, on one family, there are a number of different considerations, and I see a possibility of further breakdowns on that front, just given the political issues that may come to the surface. And as we think of one future, we do see some positivity in the world getting back to a little more interconnectedness than we've been in the last few years. And therefore, there's room for hope.
Mr. Panda, as New Delhi is set to turn into the world's power capital later this week, let's understand the definition of one world. What, to your mind, will be the definition of one world?
Okay. So, clearly, I think this is India's moment, certainly economically in terms of being the fastest growing large economy. But I think what we are bringing to the global stage is elegant leadership, if I can put it that way. And, the congregation of the world's leaders in New Delhi later this week for the G20 Summit is a high point, of course, of a year-long series of activities. As Sangita mentioned, I think what has been unique about India's presidency is two or three things. One, that we have elevated the discourse beyond finance, beyond economics, as I said, as Sangita put it. Secondly, that this has not been restricted to only Delhi or the metro cities, but it has been a year-long celebration throughout the country in tier 2, tier 3 cities. This is truly a way to showcase the new India, the fantastic new infrastructure that we're building, the tourism potential that we have, and much more. And I think the other important thing that India has brought to the table is inclusivity, not least by way of advocating for the African Union to be a permanent member of the G20. And that is exactly, I think, what comes out of the connotation of one world.
Dr. Shah, the hallmark for India again has been its technology prowess, the digital stack, the digital trinity, if I may use the word. Do you think that, in a sense, could also occupy a lot of center stage? Just to bring up to speed our viewers with a simple point that UPI, which is made in India, is now challenging a lot of global banks. In that technology is getting adopted by other nations also. So do you think a lot of conversation could be really centered around technology transformation?
So I'm going to take a stab at that, and then I think Anish will have a lot more to add. This is his area. But let me, just talk a bit about the broader context. So there is, of course, things that need to be discussed in terms of anti-inflationary policy. So what can the world do to contain inflation? And that is definitely going to be on the conversation table. I believe that cybersecurity is a critical area and will also become something which we're expecting should be included in the leadership statement. We're looking for, I think, something on tax and across-country border tax. But digital public goods and the ability to share some of the public stack with other nations, I believe, is clearly going to be discussed and kind of propounded as a methodology to bring countries ahead. Because what has happened on the UPI is something that the world is really looking at. And then I would definitely like to add that as someone who has worked with G20 Empower and had the privilege of leading it over this year, you will see a significant underpinning of India's historic kind of paradigm shift in the way the world views women. To not say we're looking at women development, but this is women-led development. And India has really showcased a mechanism and a framework to do that. Finally, I think it is critical, and we will see it, the fact that the world is quite far away from our ability to reach the SDG goals, and critical initiatives to accelerate the pace of achieving our SDG goals will also be on the agenda for leaders. But shifting to Anish for his point of view on digital, please.
Thanks, Sangita. So, Nikunj, digital is clearly a great solution that India has to offer to the world. This is again a space where India has taken leadership and has a digital stack that can significantly enhance efficiency for its companies that operate as well as for the consumers. So this is one which in some ways will really be much easier to do. The tougher challenges are what Sangita outlined, and I do want to highlight the outstanding work that has been done on Empower And that is a significant contribution that India is making on the world stage in terms of women-led development. And this is one where, again, I feel very proud of the fact that India is taking that leadership on the world stage to do so. And similarly, on climate and on inflation, these are going to be pressing problems that will take much more work to solve. And therefore, I think will take a lot more attention than technology will in these discussions.
Nikunj, if I can weigh in on this as well, you referred to UPI, which is, of course, the standout success. And recently we have hit the landmark of 10 billion transactions in a month, and that speaks volumes. But I think there is much more to India's digital drive than UPI. The India stack covers health tech, ed tech, etc. And I think what has been good about our significant investment in digital public infrastructure is that it has helped us leapfrog our traditional constraints, which held back progress and development. And as the Honorable Prime Minister puts it, it's something which connects and empowers people. And I think, again, this is one area where the world has much to learn from India. And on our part, of course, the Prime Minister has made it clear that we are willing to share this technology and our experience with the rest of the world. In fact, the idea is hopefully to have this available in 50 countries over the next 5 years. And innovation is not limited to India alone, but our ability to innovate and roll it out on scale is something that is not possible anywhere else in the world. And anything which stands the stress test of a successful rollout in India, I think can be a wonderful foundation for the rest of the world to build on.
Mr. Panda, if I have to put an overarching theme, the overarching theme in the world right now is the world is getting divided in terms of ideologies, in terms of trade blocks, and also in terms of supply chain. First, it happened because of COVID. Now it's happening because of the war. Can G20 be the forum where something which is very basic, which is getting the supply chains right, could be addressed?
So on this, Nikunj, this is a very important point because there are two aspects to it. It's not just supply chain, but it started with your earlier comment that the world is getting divided. And how do we start bringing more harmony? Comes back to the point on one family. And India is really well positioned. If you look at various players in the world today, many of them have taken more extreme positions. And India stands and has the ability to be able to bring them together. And that is what we would look for. Obviously, a very difficult task, but it's one that India's got itself into a global leadership position to be able to do, and therefore could be effective in doing so.
So if I can add one or two points on this one, I think immediately pre-COVID, the entire aspect of manufacture in India, so our ability to participate in the global supply chains enhanced. But more significantly is the ideological platform. So on one side, you saw development of the concept of the global south. But I think the Prime Minister's statement that every country's voice matters, however big or small, came back to this important point that we must recognize and acknowledge the combination of the world power, and that cooperation, collaboration, equitable growth, sustainability, and a sense of fair play is really the new world order.
Mr. Panda, allow me to go back to a point which Ms. Reddy raised, which is inflation. Now, before COVID, we were accustomed to a world of low inflation, low rates. Suddenly, we are staring at a period of high rates, high inflation, and perhaps unbearable when it comes to certain categories. Again, can G20 be that forum where it could be addressed and it could be debated and it could also be negotiated?
So if I come in on that, you're absolutely right that COVID saw an era of extremely low interest rates as economies and looked to revive, and central banks around the world pushed in stimulus measures. But I think this is where India has done well, because it was monetary and fiscal policy working in tandem, which which has helped us come out of COVID relatively unscathed in terms of the economy. And what you have also seen worldwide is that wherever there has been an excess of stimulus measures, you are seeing inflation being far more stubborn and difficult to tackle. And not to mention, I think there is also a change in sort of labor patterns because people are, especially in the advanced economies, it's much more difficult to get them back to offices and things like that. Now, having said that, I mean, whether G20 can be a platform for some sort of a common understanding, I'm not so sure if that can happen because sovereign nations will look at it in their own manner and do what they think works best for them. But I truly think in this regard that what India has done, which is to be measured in its approach to tackling the challenges during the COVID era, while ensuring that those at the bottom of the pyramid were fully supported at all points in time, I think was the way to go. And today you are seeing that is paying dividends. I mean, although India too has had a battle with inflation, but it's largely to do with imported inflation. And relatively speaking, I think the rate hikes by the Reserve Bank of India has been far more modest than it has been in other economies. And you're seeing that some like the US are still struggling and still talking about potentially more hikes to rein in inflation. But I think there is scope for discussion. But ultimately, I believe that every sovereign nation and every central bank will do what they think works best for them.
Mr. Shah, two sectors which, in a sense, the Mahindra and Mahindra Group represents: manufacturing and autos. And this is where large attention, large capex, large investments are flowing through. Everyone is calling it as India's renaissance moment in manufacturing. EVs, where we've taken a frog leap in terms of technology and adaptation. How do you see these two large pockets, which in a sense are going to be the future drivers, getting addressed and acknowledged at G20?
This is a topic for the markets, Nikunj, not as much G20. Yes, there will be trade negotiations on that front, but we are very optimistic and bullish given the products that we've been able to deliver in the markets. We can make products that are best from a world standpoint, not just from an India standpoint. And we are now headed out to compete in global markets as we've been able to beat many of our global competitors back home. So from that perspective, manufacturing in India is working. Indian manufacturers are ready to take the global stage, have world-class products, and that again positions us really well.
Mr. Panda, I want to go back to the whole topic of finance and availability of finance. Now, India has been extremely lucky in terms of both FDI and FI inflows. But India, or a country like India, is still a credit-starved economy. Now, imagine if India, with its growth potential, is still dependent on foreign capital. Do you think this is something which needs to be addressed in G20, not only for India, but for broader world in general, where the developed countries have to really act as a springboard in terms of financing, in terms of providing the financing capital?
Nikunj, if I take that question, I would not agree that India is credit starved. I think what was a twin balance sheet problem several years ago. Today you're in a very different situation where corporate balance sheets, especially of cyclical industries, have deleveraged, and banks have raised sufficient funds to be able to meet the credit requirements for India's growth. And in fact, you are seeing measures by the Reserve Bank to tame in a little bit of liquidity so as to keep inflation under control. So I think it's a false equivalence to look at India's credit needs and look at FDI flowing into the country and draw conclusions from that. I think both domestic capital as well as foreign capital have a role to play in India's growth, which is why you're seeing large pension funds and insurance companies invest in the country. But I certainly don't think that from that point of view, India is credit starved. And indeed, if you look at it from a debt to GDP ratio perspective, both overall, public debt as well as private sector debt. India ranks very favorably in that. And I think, that works well for us in the sense that you're not overstretched. And going ahead, I think it will be a combination of both domestic capital as well as foreign direct investment, which India is looking to attract in large dollops, which will contribute to the India growth story.
I'd agree with Subhrakant on that. And in conversations with various global investors over the past year, they're all very keen to come to India. As we talk to various global firms as well, they're looking to de-risk supply chains and invest a lot more in India. So India is clearly the destination of choice for all global investors today. The challenge from a G20 standpoint will really be on debt for various low-income countries. And this is where India can play a role in terms of being a negotiator to help solve problems. IMF has warned that medium-term growth prospects are weak. More than half of our low-income countries are either in or near to debt distress. And that is double the number that we'd seen in 2015. So this is where the world does face a problem and needs to be resolved.
But carrying on that, I agree with Anish completely that G20 is about looking at the global finance situation, and I must kind of call to attention the significant move that G20 announced last month, that there was 100 billion in pledges of what is called the special drawing rights, and this was to be channelized from the richer to the poorer countries. So it was a solid kind of translation of the ideology of one world, one family. And we must also acknowledge countries that stepped up, their contribution. So Paris, Japan, France, Japan, all of them enhanced their contribution to 40%. So I think the IMF is strongly set on a stage to help these countries. And this was also validated in what happened in Zambia and how IMF stepped in and helped. So moving on, I would really think that we must re-acknowledge the important role of G20 in ensuring this capability of helping the entire world and enabling the capability of achieving the SDG goals. Now, when this SDG goal target, because ultimately it's about the ability to achieve a higher quality of life. So refocusing on the world's achievement of SDG and using the access to capital, economy development and growth as a mechanism to be channelized into usage for public good, I think is an important linkage in the entire dialogue.
Final question for you, Ms. Reddy, which is that I'm going to take a leaf from your initial comments about youth and women development. In terms of specifics, now while this could be the purpose, this could be the talking point, this could be the dialogue, in terms of anything specific, what do you think needs to be bring into action? What could be the call for action, so to speak?
So clearly there were multiple calls to action, so I'm going to try and quickly highlight a few of them. One of the big things is a joint proclamation on the need to have a gender lens in budgeting. So whether it's an allocation to, women's health, the research allocations to women's health is under 9%. So if you spend $100 on medical research, only 9% of it goes into women-related research. So this spreads across the entire enterprise, whether it's women in entrepreneurship, the focus on the care economy, because the lack of an appropriate care economy infrastructure is one of the major reasons for women's inability to participate in the formal work sector. And the linkage between women's participation and the GDP growth has been now very well established. I call it the $27 trillion global GDP lever, because if we achieve equity in women's participation, so the gender lens, the supportive infrastructure, the policies across entrepreneurship, so whether it's women's access to capital for businesses or the policy of corporates and all other workspaces in women's participation. These are the four broad. And at a foundational level, we definitely look at education, especially a focus on education for women in the digital and jobs of the future. Finally, taking a minute, India did two very important things in Empower, and I thank the Ministry of Women and Child Development, FICCI, and various corporates who supported us. But India's gift to women of the world is a platform called Tech Equity. This is a platform in 120 languages. It gives a series of courses for women to learn digital skills, and it's structured for 4 different persona based on your level of knowledge right now. So this, I think, is a transformational move. The second very important one is a mentorship platform. So the Web Mentor is a platform which enables men and women from across the world who are in positions of knowledge or capability, or men and women like all of us, to reach out and help women who have not had the similar opportunity.
All I can say is that as India organizes its biggest diplomatic event in recent times, there would be a lot of deliberation, there would be a lot of dialogue, and hopefully a lot of breakthroughs in terms of what needs to be done and where participation that really needs to increase. The list of attendees for the G20 include presidents of UK, US, France, and powerful leaders from Italy, Japan, South Korea, and Canada. The theme this time is One Earth, One Family, and One Future. So we are in for an action-packed week ahead. So Mr. Panda, Mr. Shah, Ms. Reddy, thank you so very much for joining us. And it was really a pleasure to have you on this special G20 coverage.
Thank you for having us on the show, Anish.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.